How do we evaluate these outcomes? Is A a good point to be at or not? In economics, the criteria we usually use to evaluate outcomes is efficiency. And you'll probably remember calculating consumer surplus and producer surplus in your intro courses. But here we want to reintroduce the concept of efficiency and interpret allocative efficiency within the Edgeworth Box model. So all efficient or optimal outcomes are such that no one could be made better off without making someone else worse off. In other words, there are no potential gains to be had without a trade-off. Notice that efficient and optimal will be used interchangeably here. So if I say something is Pareto efficient, I also mean it's Pareto optimal, and usually that's also used interchangeably with the term socially optimal. So what does it mean to be inefficient? An inefficient point would be a point where it is possible to change something to benefit at least some people without harming anyone else. And you can see right away why it's bad to be at an inefficient point, because in this situation, there's clearly a better outcome. If we could make a change to make people happier without making anyone worse off, why wouldn't we go ahead and make that change? And that's called a potential Pareto improvement, a situation in which we have a point that is Pareto preferred to our initial point. In other words, we can make people better off without harming anyone. So all inefficient points will have Pareto improvements that are superior to the initial endowment. Can we use this criteria to judge point A? Of course, that's the point. So if we look at point A, we want to look and see, are there allocations within the box that would make both consumer 1 and consumer 2 happier, or at least not less happy? So for consumer 1, you can see that the indifference curves look like this. And of course, happiness is increasing as consumer 1 increases consumption. For consumer 2, the indifference curves look like this. And again, increases in consumption increase happiness. Our point A is along these two indifference curves, meaning that consumer 1 and consumer 2 would be indifferent to any point along their respective indifference curve that passes through point A. But you can also see that there is an area of Pareto improvement here where both people would be above their indifference curve, in other words, happier than they are at point A. So this cigar shape represents Pareto improvements to point A. Any point in the Edgeworth box where indifference curves intersect will yield this same space of potential Pareto improvements. And what that means is that an efficient outcome or a socially optimal outcome must not lie at the intersection of indifference curves. Rather, an efficient outcome will lie at the tangency of indifference curves. Unlike point A, this allocation has no potential Pareto improvements. Moving this way would make consumer 1 better off, but consumer 2 worse off. Likewise, moving this way would improve consumer 2's situation, but make consumer 1 unhappy. And so you can see at these tangencies between the indifference curves, no potential Pareto improvements exist, and therefore we have a socially optimal outcome. The contract curve refers to the set of all Pareto optimal allocations. And notice that it will always pass through the points 0, 0 for each consumer. That's because if one person has everything and the other person has nothing, there's no way to make someone better off without taking some products away from the person who has everything and giving them to the person who has nothing. That would improve fairness, but it would not meet our criteria for an efficiency improvement. So the contract curve is defined by the tangencies of the indifference curve. And I'll remind you that the slopes of the indifference curves are equal to the marginal rates of substitution, meaning that our marginal rates of substitution will be equal for both of our consumers. In competitive equilibrium, this will also equal our price ratio. Remember, efficiency is not the only goal of society. Fairness is also important. We don't necessarily want to end up at a point where some people have everything and some people have nothing. But efficiency is an important criteria in economics because inefficient outcomes are bad. If we can potentially make everyone happier, we should pay attention to that, and we should do so.